I know what you're thinking. I typed in muscle training and they say you're in the gym. And I bet you're thinking, what's this guy got on his hand? Well, I'm about to show you. Welcome to my video on Inspiratory muscle training. Let's take a look at the inspiratory muscles used during inspiratory muscle training to help you understand how inspiratory muscle training provides a benefit to improving exercise tolerance. The pulmonary system is split into two parts: the lungs, which are responsible for putting oxygen-rich blood into the bloodstream and removing carbon dioxide by expiration. The lungs are well designed to withstand the demands faced during maximal exercise. The second part of the pulmonary system is the respiratory muscles. There are two sets of respiratory muscles: the inspiration muscles, which when they contract, it causes lungs to inflate and inhale, and expiration muscles. When they contract, it causes the lungs to deflate and exhale. The respiratory muscles are responsible for the action of breathing. The respiratory muscles could be a limiting factor on exercise tolerance depending on their strength. The amount of air expired per minute can be known as minute ventilation, and at rest we can see as little as 10 litres per minute, and up to 250 litres can be found during maximal exercise in endurance training athletes. That is massive. This increase is caused by the respiratory muscles contracting and relaxing rapidly with more force, increasing the breathing rate. This amount of work is a heavy workload for the respiratory muscles, as they are not large and make up a small percent of body weight. They perform a lot of work, but they are very fatigue resistant. The respiratory muscles are essential to enable us to sustain life. The respiratory muscles are always performing some form of endurance training, even in sedentary people. Breathing alone can count as endurance training for the respiratory muscles. The respiratory muscles carry a high mitochondrial and capillary density. The oxidative enzymes found in the mitochondria, responsible for ATP production, allow for this high aerobic capacity, which enables us to utilize lots of oxygen aerobically, ensuring that the respiratory muscles have a high endurance capacity to cope with the demand of breathing during high levels of physical activity. I mentioned earlier the respiratory muscles are very fatigue resistant, but this does not mean that they can't fatigue. During high levels of endurance exercise, the respiratory muscles may show signs of fatigue. When we begin to exercise, our breathing rate starts to elevate, and this is known as hypopnea. During maximal exercise, different parts of the body fight for oxygen-rich blood flow to keep the engaged muscles going. For instance, the legs during cycling use 77% of the cardiac output. Respiratory muscles receive 15%, a large portion for these muscles. The remaining 8% goes to the heart, brain and other internal organs. The respiratory muscles have a high metabolic demand. This is demonstrated by the 15% uptake of cardiac output when exercising at VO2 max, remembering that the respiratory muscles only make up a small percentage of the total body weight, significantly lower than other skeletal muscles, for example, the ones found in the legs. Due to a high metabolic demand for oxygen-rich blood flow by the respiratory muscles, it takes whatever it needs, depriving other working skeletal muscles receiving the amount of oxygen-rich blood flow they need to sustain the workload to exercise. This is where we see exercise tolerance start to reduce and fatigue starts to kick in. So you could say that the respiratory muscles are selfish in that they take as much as the oxygen-rich blood flow they need to maintain their work. Inspiratory muscle training has been shown to increase respiratory muscle strength, which in turn would make it more efficient in reducing their demand for the oxygen-rich blood flow. This in turn would enable the skeletal muscles to receive more blood flow during exercise, improving their endurance capacity and increasing their exercise performance. So in all, the skeletal muscles' exercise tolerance would increase due to them receiving the oxygen-rich blood they need. So from what has been previously mentioned, inspiratory muscle training could see one's performance go from this to this. A greater exercise tolerance increasing performance. Let's look at a few studies that have shown inspiratory muscle training to be beneficial by increasing the strength of the respiratory muscles. In a study by Volanatis et al., they investigated whether the effects of inspiratory muscle training would increase on rowing performance. They used 14 competitive rowers and assessed their performance at the beginning and after an 11-week program of inspiratory muscle training. This was assessed in a 6-minute all-out effort and a 5,000 kilometer time trial on a rowing machine. Also, levels of dyspnea was recorded. The Inspiratory muscle training group consisted of 13 spiritual efforts twice daily. Each effort was required the subject to inspire against a resistive device like the Power Breathe at 50% inspiratory mouth pressure. The placebo group used the same device but did 60 breaths once a day with inspiratory resistance equivalent to 15% mouth pressure. The results were as follows. The inspiratory muscle strength recorded for the IMT group was significantly increased more than that of the placebo group. The time trial in the 5K time trial was significantly increased over the sham group. The distance covered in the 6-minute all-out effort was far greater than those of the placebo group. So in all, the conclusion by Volonese et al. Was that IMT improves rowing performance on a 6-minute all-out effort and a 5K time trial, and also decreased levels of dyspnea. And the final study we're going to look at by Winckelmann et al. 2009 looked at the addition of inspiratory muscle training to aerobic training to see if it improves cardiorespiratory responses to exercise in patients with chronic heart failure and respiratory muscle weakness. They looked at this in 24 patients. All patients had been diagnosed with chronic heart failure for 6 months or more and had not been administered to the hospital or had no change in medication for the previous 3 months. Participants were split into even groups and were randomly assigned to a 12-week program of either aerobic exercise and IMT or just aerobic exercise. Before and after the intervention, the respiratory muscle function test, a 6-minute walk test and a quality of life assessment were collected by the investigators who were unaware of the patient's interventions. Aerobic exercise training protocol was as followed. They trained 3 times a week for 12 weeks, totaling 36 sessions. They exercised on a bike at a cadence of 60 RPM. Exercise intensity was monitored by heart rate. During the first 2 weeks, the duration of the exercise was 20 minutes, and 5 minutes was added every 2 weeks until the exercise reached 45 minutes. The aerobic exercise and IMT used the threshold inspiratory muscle training device similar to a P-Flex for 30 minutes, 7 times a week, once a day, with an inspiratory load of 30% mouth pressure. Every week the trainers were adjusted to maintain this 30% mouth pressure, and the patient performed 6 sessions at home and 1 supervised at the hospital. The results found that the aerobic exercise and IMT groups conjoined improved significantly on the inspiratory mouth pressure as shown in the graph compared to the A&E group, compared to the group that only did aerobic exercise. The 6-minute walk distance and quality of life scores improved similarly in both groups. So to conclude, the addition of inspiratory muscle training to aerobic exercise improves the cardiorespiratory responses to exercise in selected patients with chronic heart failure and inspiratory muscle weakness. Even though aerobic exercise shown to be beneficial, aerobic exercise with an inspiratory muscle training device is shown to provide more benefits than just aerobic exercising. So we've looked at 3 journals, one looking at the effects of inspiratory muscle training on athletes and 2 in patients with respiratory muscle problems. All 3 have shown to be beneficial. So here's a couple of devices. In the top left corner, this one's a Inspiratory. This mainly works on expiration muscles. And the one in the top right corner is a P-Flex device, and this mainly works on inspiratory muscles. But I'm going to give you a quick overview on this one, which is the Power Breathe. So yeah, this is the Power Breathe. It works in such a way, it has a spring in this chamber, and when you inhale against the spring, the valve inside lifts up, and obviously you can inspire air into your body. The more you crank it up, it provides a higher resistance for you to breathe against. So let's wind it all the way up. And we got it at level 8. Let's breathe against it. And I can feel that. I have to really pull against it to get the valve open to inspire air. So we'll make it a bit easier. We'll drop it down. That's at level 3. And let's have a go at this. And I can feel that significantly easier to breathe against. So depending on the pressure selected for you is what you'd breathe against. And what you're looking for really for a protocol to use this is about 30 breaths per day, twice a day, 5 days a week, for a period of about 8 to 12 weeks to really see a benefit in respiratory muscle strength. So all in all, it's a good mobile device. You can take it away with you, and like I said, it did show benefits. So to conclude, Inspiratory muscle training are shown to increase respiratory muscle strength, thus including exercise tolerance and performance. It is also shown to improve quality of life in patients with chronic heart failure, respiratory muscle weakness and COPD. So all in all, I'd say this is quite a beneficial piece of kit. And when I use the Power Breathe, yeah, sign me up.